Hi guys, doing a little more video testing. Let's see how this goes. Um, I'm going to be a little distracted because I'm listening to my audio on delay from YouTube through my earbuds, but I want to make sure I get good audio. I have some uh, batteries discharging in the background, so you probably hear the fan running on that. I'm sorry. There's not much I can do for that. So, it actually doesn't sound too bad. But I kind of wanted to show what you can do with prep for the boat, and, or actually not prep for the boat, but after run, what you need to do for a boat. Every time you run it, you need to grease your flex shafts and stuff, go over the boat, check all your screws, everything. I'm going to show you what I do usually when I bring the boat in. Actually home from running it, so it's sitting on the bench. Taking one earbud out because I can't stand that. It's driving me nuts, sorry. I just wanted to see how the audio was going. Let's take them both out. So this is my boat. Let me show webcam. This is Hollow Point. It's a Promarine RC MTR cat. It's 36 inches long. It's a twin. It's an X2 model, as he calls it, which means it has two motors, two ESCs in it. And I'm going to pull the hatch off. I'm going to do a lot of this one-handed, I think. Inside, there's not much you need to do. If it gets wet, I usually go through and I'll dry everything out. Everything's pretty dry. Didn't have any major issues this weekend. The previous weekend I ran it, I had quite a bit of water in there because this cooling outlet decided to slip off. And instead of the water exiting the boat, it filled the boat. Somehow it still did 67 miles an hour. But everything got wet, receiver got wet and stuff. What I do though is if things get wet in there, the ESCs are waterproof. You don't really need to do that. My servo it's not waterproof, but it's water resistant. It's out of one of my crawlers. I use that. I usually don't take that out. I'll just dry it off and throw a sponge in there. I have a couple sponges laying around. It's a trick from my buddy Howard that you just take the sponge, tuck it down inside here, and let the water run back there. And then the sponge will soak up any water that's sitting in the boat. Just let it sit for a couple minutes, wring it out, put a dry sponge in there, and do it again. If the receiver gets wet, the receiver is not waterproof in this boat. It's actually none of the receivers I use. These are SR215s. They're Spectrum receivers. What I usually do is I will take electronics cleaner. You can buy it at any auto parts store, and I'll just spray a little bit inside the receiver. I'll unplug it, remove the receiver completely from the boat. Spray a little bit in there, shake whatever moisture from the electronic parts cleaner out, and then what I do is I will drop it in a Tupperware that I have full of rice, and it will sit there for the whole week. And that will keep it from getting corrosion or anything like that in there. So this is Hollow Point, and we're going to do a little maintenance on her. Sorry for the small screen up in the, that I show you. Actually, I'm not even showing you anything because I just set the software up. I'm sorry guys, I'm not showing you anything. ESCs, they're waterproof, don't have to touch them. Receiver, which is right here. I don't know if I can get the camera in there to show you that. Which is right there. Right there. I'll pull the plugs out of it and throw it in that tub of rice and let it sit over the week. If it gets wet. I didn't have any issues with it getting wet this week. 2 weekends ago, this is the water line that slipped off, and it filled the boat with water. So the receiver got wet, and I pulled the receiver out, put it in the rice for the week. It's actually been in there for 2 weeks. And this morning, or actually last night, when I was prepping the boat for the run for this morning, I took the receiver out, plugged it all back in, put it back in the boat, and tested my radio gear, made sure everything was working fine, and she ran great today. She took a little bit of damage. It was pretty choppy out this morning. A little bit of rough running, and we took a chip out of the side of the boat. I'm not quite sure how that chip came out, but it came out. But it's my favorite boat of all. Mike at ProMarine makes some really cool boats. They run flat, they run perfect, and it kind of hurts every time I get a little chip in it. But you know, as you can see, there's little chips everywhere in the boat, and that's just wear and tear on the boat. It just happens. You can see on the hatch from the hatch tape. It just happens. The gel coat peels up, and I've seen some of the more expensive boats actually have the same issue as well. So what I'm going to do is, after I run the boat, I pull the drives off, and your drives will be different. Everybody's drives are a little different. Grab my stool so I can get down here and work on the boat as well. Position this a little bit. So what these are what they call a two-piece strut, and I'll show you in a minute why they're a two-piece strut. But as you can see up in here, this is your adjustment for the strut. It's just a screw. As we loosen it, you can see the strut drop down a little bit. That's what adjusts your ride height, your height of your strut, which adjusts the ride angle of the boat. And the more that points down, the more it's going to push the nose of the boat into the water. If it's level, it's going to keep the boat level. If it's pointed up, actually if it points up, it's going to pull the nose out of the water, and it's going to ride a little dry. So as your conditions change, you may want to change that strut a little bit. I always set it at the same. I don't change it. And I've always just used the battery to adjust my ride quality of the boat. So we got the adjustment screw out. This right here, there's a little threaded nut here, and that takes the prop shaft and the strut off of the boat. You push your Teflon sleeve back in. This I don't really do much with. There's quite a bit of grease down in there. Every 5 or 10 runs, I'll take a pipe cleaner. Just take a pipe cleaner from the dollar store and run it down inside that strut, clean out the nasty grease and stuff, but it doesn't really hurt it. I run it, I do that maybe every 5 or 10 runs. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry, that was the battery for the boat discharging. So I said, like, every 5 or 10 runs, I'll run a pipe cleaner down into the strut, clean the nasty grease out of there. I don't pack any grease back in there. I do leave a little bit of grease on the flex shaft, and that will eventually, that grease ends up down in there just from the flex shaft spinning and kind of a drill or an auger action that pushes the grease into the strut. So as you can see, this is your flex shaft. Um, this is what drives the boat, drives the prop. It's on a catamaran or a dual motor boat. You have a direction. The flex shaft is directional. So the way it's wound, you want to make sure that it is on a catamaran. You want the wires on the flex shaft to form kind of a herringbone pattern, with the point pointing towards the front of the boat. If you're running your props spinning in, if they're spinning out, it's the opposite. You want it pointing towards the back of the boat. So flex shafts are directional. If you put them in backwards, they will unwind and they will cause havoc inside the boat. It will destroy your stuffing tubes. It will rip stuffing tubes out of boats. I've seen flex shafts go through fiberglass hulls and just spin around like a saw and cut a big hole in the boat. So it's the one thing you always want to check, and you always want to make sure that your flex shafts are going the right way. If they're not going the right way, you're going to create all kinds of damage to your boat. So I got two 10mm wrenches, and we're going to loosen the collet on the motor. And I'm going to move the camera up there and see if you can see that. I don't know if we're going to be able to get that on camera. It's a little bit of a pain in the neck to get that on the camera, because I kind of got to work in there and have the camera in there at the same time. Let's get a little light in there. Let's see if we can see that. So your collet is right at the end of the motor. That's right here. And this little white tube is the stuffing tube. That's pretty much where you want it to run usually. When you're setting up the boat to go back out again, you just want just a little tick of it hanging out of the stuffing tube. Stuffing tube, like I said before, is this brass tubing right here that the flex shaft runs through. And then, excuse the hands, we're going to loosen the the collet. And on this boat, it's two 10mm wrenches, and it loosens the collet. And if you're familiar with a Dremel, you kind of know what a collet is. Sorry, you're getting moved around here. Let's see if I can get some sort of angle where I'm not hitting it with my hands. Sorry guys, it's just not going to work out that way for you. If you're familiar with a Dremel tool, you know what a collet is, or power tools actually. As you tighten the collet up, it tightens up some teeth inside there, and that clamps onto the flex shaft. So if this becomes loose, you can imagine it creates a nightmare. Alright, so that's loose. Let me take you out of there. So now that collet's loose, we can pull the flex shaft out of the boat. Maybe. There you go. And that is your flex shaft. So my strut is a two-piece, which means this part of the flex shaft down here is square, and it fits into a square pocket on the bottom, on the back of the prop shaft. And it kind of gets sandwiched in there. So occasionally you will have a flex shaft fail. Let me get back in here. Occasionally you will have a flex shaft fail on it, on a boat. And if they snap completely, you may lose the flex shaft, you may lose your prop shaft, your drive dog, all that stuff, which I've had problems. I've had that on one of my other boats. Lost a $100 prop. But the nice thing about this setup, and not many people use this setup anymore, not even ProMarine, they don't even use this setup anymore. The flex shaft is kind of encapsulated in the boat, so it doesn't, if it snaps or something happens, it is going to do damage inside the boat, but you're not going to lose your props. Get my hand out of the way of the camera there. You are going to lose props, but you're not going to lose props, but you may do some damage. I've had one break in this boat already, and it ripped the stuffing tube out. It didn't damage the stuffing tube, but it broke the support off of the bottom of the boat. I had to glue it back down. So that's your flex shaft, and I don't know if you can see that. The end is square. That end goes into the prop shaft. The other end is round, and that goes into the collet on the motor. What I usually do after run, I take one of my dirty old socks and wipe the grease off it and just get any kind of moisture off of it. And then what I do is I take that flex shaft and I throw it in the boat on the side it came out of. And then we put our strut back on the boat, which is going to push our stuffing tube up in there. And I just hand tight everything. It doesn't have to be real tight. It's just there to keep all the nuts and bolts and screws and nuts and collets and all that stuff in place. So when I get ready to prep the boat for the next run, and I'm guessing I'm probably going to have to do a video of that. Yesterday I spent 10 hours in here prepping RC stuff for this morning, for 3 hours of playtime this morning. But you gotta pay the price if you want to play, right? So I just tighten these up just so they're on there loose, but they're not going to fall off. Oh, hit the camera. So they're on there loose, but they're not. It's not going to fall off. When I do a setup, I'll do a separate video on how to do that. I have a setup board that I use for this boat, and I have a specific setup I use for this boat almost every time. I don't have a whole lot of changes that I do to this boat because, like I said, once it's set, this thing runs flat all day long. And even in the chop, flat water, it's still a good setup. With a chop in the water, the only thing I'll do is I'll move my batteries a little bit forward just to keep the nose down. Because it is a catamaran, it will like to grab the air and flip over backwards. So if it's pretty choppy out, I move my batteries forward. If it's glass, I move the batteries all the way back, and this thing just screams across the lake. So removing that strut, and bear with me, I'm gonna be a little boring here. I'm gonna have to find a 10mm wrench because I just put it, those damn 10mm, you put them down, they disappear. Oh, still in the boat. So I'm gonna loosen this collet on this side. I don't know if I can get a better angle of this time. So you could see the collet in there with the flex shaft going in, right in between those two green lines there. So that's what I'm loosening up. Don't know if I'm going to be able to do this and keep the camera in there. But see, I have the right side of the wrench in there. And there you go. You guys go sliding off the ESC. But that one loosened pretty quickly there. Pull that shaft out. Put you back down here. Sorry if you're getting seasick. So, as you can see, I don't know if you can see this on the, there's quite a bit of moisture. You can see the drops of water on the flex shaft there. That's why you want to take them out and dry them off, because they will rust. No matter how much grease you have in there, they're still going to rust. And you don't want it rusting up inside the Teflon tube and stuff. It just makes it nasty. So I take the flex shaft, put it on the side that it came out of. Just makes it easier, less confusion. I always double check them anyway, to make sure they're going the right direction. Like I said, if they're going the wrong direction, they're going to create havoc inside this boat, and do a lot of damage. And with this being my favorite boat, I don't want to do damage to it. So we are putting everything backhand tight. And she's going to be stored until possibly next week or the week after. Depends on how I feel about running it. I don't run it every time. I sometimes just go down and hang out with the RC Mafia, our group that we run with, and just I'll run recovery. I don't like to run this boat all that often because it is my favorite boat and it is getting beaten up. And Promarine doesn't make this color scheme anymore on their boats, so it may be time to purchase another Promarine and maybe put this on the back shelf and only run it when it's glass out and pretty, and keep it pretty, or as pretty as I can. It's already got some beauty marks on it. But that's probably that's my after run of the boat. The other thing I will do, I don't know if I have canned air in here, and I don't want to run the live stream going. I do have canned air. Is I'll blow out the air line, the water cooling line, so there's no water in there. All right. So what I do is I will take a straw, and if you watch, I don't know if you can see the rudder there. You can a little bit. I've already pointed down the water inlets here. You're not going to see them on that side though. You have to be moved over here. Alright, so there's the water inlets on the rudder. As it's running, it picks up water here, pumps it up through the lines in the top of the rudder, and then into the boat to cool the ESCs and the motors. What I do to clean that out, I don't like leaving water sit in there, especially if it's going to be on the rack for a long period of time. What I do is, I don't know if you're going to be able to, let me see if I can move the laptop so you can see this. Yeah, sorry, bear with me, we're getting there. Put some wheelie bar wheels underneath you so you can see. Alright, so what I do, if you watch right here, I stick the straw into the water outlet and blow the water back out, and that clears all the water lines inside the boat. You don't have water sitting in your heat sinks on your ESC. There's not water sitting in the jacket in the motor. Sorry, I'm covering myself. You won't have water sitting in the water jackets on the motor. We run in a pond or it's a lake, but it's pretty dirty cedar water. And the longer that stuff sits in there, you start getting sediment in your heat sinks, sediment in your water cooling jackets on the motors and stuff. And that's going to cause damage. It's going to cause problems later on. You'll have overheating of your ESCs, overheating of your motors and stuff. So every time I bring this thing off the lake, I bring it home. The first thing, or the one thing I always do, is I blow the water out of it. So if you watch that rudder again, you're going to see water come out of the top hole now, I think. I think that was the hole. Yeah, it's peeing all over my leg. Alright, so the cooling lines are all cleaned out. My leg is soaking wet. But she's ready to go back up on the rack here. So again, everything's hand tight. That one's a little tighter than I normally do, but everything's hand tight on the back of the boat. Because when we go to set it up, we'll show you in another video later on of how we set the boat up. But I just leave them loose because, you know, if I bang into them with another boat or something, I want these to move. I don't want to bend a prop. I don't want to bend a strut, anything like that. So that's how I prep hollow, or not prep, I guess prep for storage hollow point. I do it with all my boats. All my boats, as soon as they come off the lake and they get back in the garage here, blow the water out of the cooling lines, pull the prop shafts, dry them off, and make sure there's no moisture on them. If they've been sitting for a week or something with moisture in there, I usually will dry them off. If I can't get to it right away, 9 times out of 10 I get to it right away. But if I can't get to it right away, I'll pull the and it's been sitting for a week, I'll pull the shafts, I'll dry them off, and then I'll put some Cow RC udder butter. This is what I use for lube in the flex shafts, which is it's a waterproof marine grease that a lot of rock crawler guys use, and you can see it's well used here. I'm almost out of it. I'm gonna have to order some more. It's from cowrc.com. But I use that to lubricate the flex shafts. I've used it on all my boats and never had a problem with it. Even my 60-inch cat, I wiped down the flex shaft with that and lube it up with that, and never had an issue with flex shafts in my boats. The only problem I did have, I had a flex shaft. Actually, I had too big a prop, I think, and the flex shaft didn't survive. It just tightened up to the point where it squeezed itself and got skinnier. And I figured, okay, I'm going to go to wire drives and put piano wire drives in my Zelos and set the fastest boat's ever gone. Its personal best was 78 miles an hour. And on the very next run, that piano wire, the motor shifted a little bit, and instead of the piano wire just kind of bending with the collet cut the wire off. So I lost the wire drive, the drive dog, and $100 CNC 3-bladed prop. So that's the only time I've ever had, only 2 times I've had problems with flex shafts, and they were with the same boat. They were within 2 weeks of each other, and I think it was just the way I was setting the boat up. I was putting too much prop at it, and the stock flex shafts couldn't handle it. The wire drives handled it very well, but because of a flip, the motor moved, and the collet was cutting through the wire drive, and I didn't realize it. So that's pretty much it. That's storage prep for Hollow Point and my other boats, and we're going to be putting her up on the wall. I have a rack. I'll flip the camera around so you can see the rack of boats that I've built. And this is a setup that one of our other guys in the club set up. Was a nice shelving system for our boats, so they get stored relatively damage free, as long as you don't throw something at this side of the garage. But we'll show you. Let me see if I can get the webcam up again. I'll show you our rack of boats. And there's a large stock of pool noodles that I have here. I actually have boats buried underneath the pool noodles and a fifth scale buggy. But all it is shelving brackets, and they're covered with pipe insulation, adhesive pipe insulation. So they work out pretty good for storing the boats. See if I can get this so you can actually see what's going on over there. The wires come in, stay. There you go. All right, so that's our storage point. And all I do, I have my spare pool noodles sit between the boat and the wall and the brackets, so they don't get scratched up. And I keep my stands underneath. And that's pretty much it. So next video I put up, we'll see what we can do. Yeah, Al, no, you can't see you know what's under the towels, and you're not allowed to tell anybody else what's under the towels. Nobody's going to see that. There was a select few that were here the other day that saw it, and they're under non-compete, so they're not allowed, or NDAs, so they're not allowed to disclose what's under the towels. Otherwise, I know where you live. But that's pretty much it. We're gonna, next time we take the Pro Marine out, I'll do another video. We'll show you the prep for getting it ready for the lake and charging the batteries and getting everything set up. The video previous to this was kind of a test video I was doing to help some guys out that have a YouTube channel out there, 707 Streetcars of the 707, to show them how to do live videos and stuff on YouTube. But I also did some LiPo advice in there on how to store your LiPos and to manage your LiPo batteries. And that goes for anything that you run: planes, boats, drones, cars, bashers, whatever you want to run and it runs on LiPo. Check out that video. Make sure you do what's in there, and you'll see why in that video. But that's pretty much it for now. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, Al. Since you're my only person viewing right now, I'm sure we'll see some more coming out off the subscriber list here, checking out the video, but Al's my only live friend. It's kind of sad. But talk to you guys later. If you have any questions, send them in the comments. If you want to see anything specific on the boats, cars, whatever, we can do that too for you. Except for that one that's under the towel. Nobody can see that. So have a good weekend, guys. Enjoy yourselves. Stay safe. And we'll talk to you again later.